so often as men, we view emotions as some sort of sign of weakness, right? And the narrative's changing around this culturally, but I just want to name that there's a massive amount of research that will show you, especially in the matters of leadership, if you want to be an effective leader and you want to influence people around you and you want to live a life of success, and I would even argue fulfillment, it's best done through knowing what's happening inside of your own heart and mind and using that as information and intelligence to pull levers in your life. So emotional intelligence is being able to track what's occurring in my own body around how I'm feeling, being able to express it, that's part two, and being able to read it in other people and know what's happening for them. So those are like three tools we can work, and they're all a little bit different and distinct.
Luke Entrup, welcome to Men This Way. It's good to have you on. Good to meet you.
Yeah, thank you. Thrilled to be here. Love what you're doing. Love the show. So happy to be here today.
Thanks, man. Well, you know, what just initially leapt out to me as I learned about you and your work was the father-son rites of passage work that you do. Man, that's some juicy stuff. Mm-hmm. So I'm really excited to dive into that. It's very timely for me in a sense, in that I'm actually losing my father. I'm going through the loss of my father, but I'll share a little bit more about that in a little bit. But to help our audience get to know you more as a man, as a human, I'd love to hear about some significant event or experience in your early life that played a fundamental role in shaping you as a man.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, happy to share this event. So, a little bit about me. I grew up, one of four children, and my big thing was I loved to be an actor. I was on stage. I basically grew up on stage. I was constantly doing, performances and acting in theater and modeling, all this stuff, right? And it was my everything. And then at some point when I hit about 18 or 19 years old, it was no longer the thing to do. Something about it just kind of dissipated. It wasn't fun anymore. I didn't particularly enjoy it. And it left me in this place for several years where I was a bit lost, didn't quite know what I was doing, spinning my wheels, just a general kind of flatness to my life and a malaise. And my father invited me to a men's weekend when I was 22 years old.
Wow.
And this profoundly impacted me, changed my life really fundamentally. I definitely went in a boy, and I came out a man, right? Like, I was surrounded by about 80 dudes that were just like, they looked you in the eye. I could feel how powerful they were. There was nowhere for me to hide in my own self-doubt, insecurity, narrow-mindedness, shutting down. Like I had to really first face them and then face myself. And I remember there's a moment in this men's weekend where we're outside kind of around a fire, and this kind of elderly man took me to the front and presented me to the rest of the tribe, if you will. And he basically said something like, "You're now a man." And everyone cheered. And it was this moment where that was it. I was now a man. And these guys over, that weekend and then in the years to follow helped me understand what that really means. Like, what does it mean to be a man who's not just living for his own selfish desires, but is living a mission outside of himself? What does it mean to be a man who values feeling and understanding your emotions just as much as what you're accomplishing in the world, and that how important those two are tied together? And to just really understand this idea that like men can have a spine and an open heart. And it sent me on this lifelong quest to live a life of deeper truth, deeper meaning, to just really be alive in what I'm doing. And it radically changed the trajectory of my life.
Man, like what an amazing story. And I'm like so excited for you and glad for you and jealous of that relationship of your dad having, whatever drew him into that world, such that, I've had this experience with my dad growing up where my father was very much a a seeker. He tried out lots of religions. He took me to a Hopi Indian reservation when I was in my teens. We met with a medicine man. We went to a mosque and did what's a Ramadan at a mosque. He wasn't Muslim, but we did all these things, right? Just experimenting, exploring. He never took me into men's work, but he would always say this thing. I'm a teenager, and my dad was exploring all these big occult ideas and metaphysics, and he would always say, Bryan, when the time is right, you will know. Or he just, when the time is right. He kept saying that over and over and over when I was a teenager, right? Luke, the time was that time never came. It never came. So much so I'm pushing 50, and I went to visit my dad just a couple months ago. I hadn't seen him in years. We've been fairly estranged for some time. And even on my trip to see him, and I'm back there saying, look, Dad, I'm here. I want you to know I'm available. I know you're getting older. Your life is probably coming to a close. He's 80. And I just want you to know I'm here. I love you. Anything I can do. And still, he's giving me the line, you're not ready. He literally said those words, and I won't go into the details of why, but he said, you're not ready to kind of know what I know. And I remember thinking, like, you motherfucker, I'm almost 50. And in your eyes, I'm still not ready. Right. And so I wonder, I'm curious if you could speak to this. I think this is such an epidemic in our world of men whose fathers never did and still don't. Men that are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, whose fathers never brought them, helped them over the threshold of, okay, you are now truly a man in my eyes. What do you know about that in the culture we're living in?
Yeah, I mean, well, the chain was broken, right? So in ancient times and in communities and cultures that live closer to the land, these rites of passage of marking one phase of life, moving into the next, they're honored in ceremony and ritual, right? And we see this in some cultures around the world, but in our kind of westernized culture, the chain was broken. So your father's father did not have that, and he wasn't able to give it to you. And we're living in a culture where that's led by uninitiated men that have not been given a meaningful rite of passage into healthy masculinity. And so we see all these ways that men will seek out that sense of belonging to a tribe and a community in ways that leave harm, that are maladaptive, that leave a wake, that have them not feeling connected to themselves. And that separation, that distance that you feel, that you're articulating, that you have with your father, is a symptom of that. It's a symptom of a lack of a structure of belonging in a community that honors moving from one way into the next. But the good news is, like, it's a fixable problem. It's probably only going to take a couple hundred years, but it's a fixable problem, right? We can reintroduce these ways of being where we're saying, like, you were a boy, now you're a man, and this is what it means to be a man.
Yeah, I think I said in another recent podcast episode that I think I was born 200 years too soon. I would love to know. I feel like we are going to have moved through a lot of this, this adolescent stage that we're in. Ironically, we're talking about rites of passage. I think humanity are going into a rites of passage, and it's going to be fraught with challenge and danger and loss and grief and all the things, identity shit, all of that. I agree with you. I think that I do like that we're able to have conversations like this, that even what I'm going through with my father, man, I've worked at in therapy. I've worked at in my own men's groups, through my own journey, going to men's work. I'm at a place, it took me to my late 40s to where I can hear that from my dad, you're still not ready. And not be enraged by it. I mean, there's a part of me that's still like, dude, fuck off, but I'm no longer led by that. Right. I was just like, okay, my dad, like you said, his dad didn't do this for him. He can't do it for me. Well, that's okay. I'm not going to take that on anymore. And I'm going to learn. So I want to hear more about, well, first off, is your father still alive?
He is. Yeah, he's alive. He still goes to his men's group every week or every, a couple times a month. And Yeah, I'm off to do a fishing and hunting trip with him
Amazing.
in a couple of weeks, where we'll just be together in a boat on the water for a week, and yeah, so
Luke, you do know, and I know you know, how precious and tragically rare that is.
indeed, and it's why I do it. It's I took him to the Indy 500
Mm,
this year. It's like these moments of like with him right now when we can still do that is so rare, and
mm,
I also know how blessed I am to have a father that has mostly been present for me throughout my
mm,
life,
mm-hmm.
and know that that's much of the product of the way that I live is because
Mm,
of the way that he
mm,
raised me as a father, and
mm.
incredibly blessed in that way. Yes.
Yeah. What was the organization that he was a part of, maybe still is, that had you surrounded by 80 men in a room
It's
in your 20s?
It's the Mankind Project.
The
So they have
Mankind
this,
Project.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. It's a pretty
Okay.
large men's organization. They do this
Yeah.
flagship training called the New Warrior Training Adventure. They're still doing it all these years later. So,
Yeah, that actually was my initiation into men's work. That warrior training weekend.
mm-hmm,
I think I did it when I was 39 or 40, so about 10 years ago.
mm-hmm.
And indeed, in fact, I remember, oh my goodness, that there was the moment, and I won't give things away here in case men want to do that. But there was that moment where an elder man was sitting at the edge of a woods when I arrived,
Mm-hmm.
and I was, told to go see him, and I sat in a chair in front of him, and he just looked at me, and he said one sentence: "Welcome. We have been waiting for you a long time." I fucking burst out laughing. No, crying.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
cried, the tears, like, oh, I've been waiting for someone to. I didn't even know I was waiting for men, an elder, to say welcome.
Mm-hmm.
Right, we've been waiting for you a long time. That moment, I'll never forget it as long as I live. What do you? What
Yeah.
was? What
I,
do you know about that moment? What was happening
Yeah,
for
I
me?
think it speaks. I mean, it speaks to two things, right? It speaks, first of all, to this pain of isolation and separation that
Mm,
is the experience of being a man in this culture where there's a lack of depth in our connection. We can talk about the game and we can talk about our jobs, but to have that someone really look you in the eye and say, welcome, and, I want to know more about you, what's really on your heart. That's not the way that the kind of default culture works.
mm,
But it also speaks to the this deep, I would argue, like genetic need. It's like baked into our DNA, this need for belonging and to be part of
yeah.
a community and a tribe and to be seen and to be held by elders. We are such highly social creatures, right? Not so long ago, if we were kicked out of the tribe or something, we were lost from the tribe, we may die, right? It's hardwired into our genetics, our survival to be in communion and be in community. And so what you're speaking to is that, when we start to feel that sense of belonging, especially as men, right, to be in a tribe of men, it wakes something up in our DNA, in deep in our bones that says, yeah, this is the right way to live, to have a brother that's at my back and have a brother that's looking me in the eye and calling me forward. That's a very powerful and compelling way to be.
Yeah. Yeah. That word belonging, I've noticed in the years I've done men's work and brought men into men's work, that belonging, even if guys don't get any of their so-called problems solved, the things that they think they're coming here for, right?
Mm-hmm.
When they feel that embrace of a brotherhood of men, that it's like all of you is welcome here. That belonging, is because we're living in exile most of our
Yeah.
lives.
Well, and there's something really distinct about it being with men, with
Mm,
other men, right? So
hmm.
there's something that, like, we can create, we can maybe have a sense of community and belonging in
Right.
our local town or where we live, and we can have, whatever, dinner parties with our closest friends, right?
Hmm.
That and our partners, but there's something about going off in the woods with other men where the focus is on both supporting each other, saying like, I'm there for you, brother, but also challenging each other, saying like, saying something like, I see that. That's BS, or deeper, brother. You can go deeper than that. There's something about that the fierceness of that, and the sense of like iron sharpening iron, that is such a distinct and necessary quality, at least for me in my own life. It's like, it's this distinct form of nourishment and distinct form of support and challenge. That is a necessary ingredient.
Present to how I used to go to women unknowingly for that support and challenge. I would use my intimate relationships as the place. Again, I didn't consciously do that. I didn't want any challenge. And yet the only people that I would allow into my inner space who would see what was really going on were the women I was partnering with. The intimate relationships. And boy, did they often not like what they saw, and rightfully so. And so, I talk about this a lot in my work, how unfortunately intimate relationships have become the containers of transformation, of rites of passage. Women are like our stewards of transformation, which they don't want to be.
Yeah.
They do not want that role. It's not theirs. And yet, because we don't do this work in mass as men, they by default then become the ones who have to hold it for us, and it's just a shit show.
Yeah, I mean, just to just underline that point, I mean, ask them, right? Like, ask a woman that you find to be radiant and beautiful and elegant and attractive and all the things that you would want in a woman. Find one and ask her if she would trust you more, if you were in a men's group, or if you had a group of men that was holding you to account. It's incredibly attractive, right? Because they know that they don't have to be the ones that are holding your entire process, that you can show up in a way that places your attention not just on your own pain and suffering and closure and shadows and shortcomings, but you have enough capacity that you've done that work where you can place your attention on her and opening her heart.
100%. They don't want us. They don't want to be the ones holding us accountable. They'll do it, but that's not the role they want to play, and it only breeds resentment and disconnection. And anyway, let's talk more about rites of passage. So, what are we talking about, particularly in the context of your work, rites of passage? I know you work with fathers and sons, which I think is a beautiful and essential frame for our culture, enrolling fathers and their sons into these rites of passage. But briefly describe what is a rites of passage and why it's so important for young men.
Yeah. So a rite of passage is any sort of ceremonial demarcation of moving from one phase of life into the next, right? And not just the phase, but the way of being. So there are some significant thresholds. Being born, you might say, like being weaned, going to school for the first time. But one of the major rites of passage is the movement from childhood into adolescence, right? And the changing body, puberty hits, and this is quite a moment in a boy's life, right? And then there's another one. The people that have really studied rites of passage, they'll point out there's another one around 17 to 20. And that's actually the rite of passage into adulthood, right? Where we say that's the whole experience I had. You're no longer a boy, you're now a man. This one right in adolescence, so this is where I'm focused, is the movement from childhood into puberty and what that means. And often that's about like really starting to have some level of mastery in one's body and really wanting to be part of some sort of team, tribe, club. This is where like sports teams become really important in a boy's life, or band, or for me, it was like acting, like being part of some sort of community where you're working on a level of mastery. And if we don't have if we don't have these ceremonies that help mark this, we start to look for that sense of belonging in really often like not very healthy ways. So this is where, kids start to really get into some trouble if they don't feel like they're part of something. So what we've done is created some experiences where we've really focused on strengthening the bond between the father figure and the son. So we take them out into the wild for a weekend. We're sleeping in cabins, but we're out in the woods. They have a lot of time hiking together, and then we do quite a bit of ceremony and processing around what type of man do you want to become. We do a whole element that we call warrior training, where they're doing teaching them meditation, martial arts, light martial arts. We have them jump into some cold water if they want to. We do some work around what are emotions and how can they help you, and what type of person do you want to become. So it's really this kind of training ground for them to start to step into a path of warriorship, all with the presence of their fathers. And the idea there is that we know inevitably they're going to need to push off against their parents, but when things get really hard, we hope we've laid enough ground that when they get hard, their father is one of the people they turn to when they're in the throes of teenage angst, that they've had a deep connection with their dad. And the kind of culminating aspect of this experience is a ceremony on the last night where we really acknowledge that they are now on the path of warriorship and that they are squarely in their adolescence.
How can a father identify when is the right time? Like what signs might his son be showing? You said 17 to 20 is this, you identified that age. I know some boys are like, 13, 14, 15, they're starting to get into some dangerous behavior. What we might call rebellious behavior, et cetera. Like what age do you think boys in our culture are ready to undergo rites of passage, and how would a father recognize that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll just give you the age range that for this, there's two, right? So the first one, the one that I'm working is 10 to 14. Okay. It's childhood into puberty, right? 10 to 14. That's when we do a lot of work with the father. Okay. The 17 to 20 is the passage into adulthood. And that I would argue is not done with the father. That needs to be done by the other members of the tribe, the community. Okay. This is where the uncles would go take the boy out of the arms of his mother. The father would stay behind and they would go initiate him in the bush or into the wild. Yeah. They would, his father was not actually present for that. We're working this passage of adulthood into adolescence, into puberty, 10 to 14. And it very much is about establishing a healthy connection with the parental figure. Okay. And so I'm drawing the distinction because they're two entirely different forms of initiation, right?
Definitely. Oh, I mean, I intuitively feel that in my own body, that those are very distinct times. And I'm curious, a little anthropological side note here. What are some of your favorite, rites of passage that you've heard of through traditional cultures? I mean, I have some of my own that really stand out for me that are like gnarly and man, I would never want to undergo that. And I get why they need to undergo that. But I'm curious, what are some that stand out for you?
Yeah, maybe two. One would be in East Africa. Very simple. You go out with a spear, you kill a lion, or you don't come home.
Wow.
Right. So an element of initiation is the ordeal, right? If we look at it through the lens of Joseph Campbell's model, the hero's journey, there's a separation and then there's an ordeal where we face some sort of dragon, demon, adversary, and we need to face the fear that lives within us in order to do that. And then we come home when we're reintegrated back into the community. So the ordeal in this is very clear. Go kill an effing lion. And no joke, some don't make it back. Yeah. The other one I like is it's very simple. When entering the monastery, the head is shaved. And it's a shaving of the identity. And so that there's a blank mirror and a blank slate about who I really am, the truth of who I really am at a deeper level. And every time I look in a mirror, catch my reflection, I remember that. And I remember my vows that I've made. It's a remembering of my commitment to my path as a monk.
That's so interesting because I was in the military, and what's one of the first things they do when you enter basic training? They shave your head. But it's a violent process. There's a lot of screaming. There's a lot of bullying. There's a lot of intensity. It's whether you want to be there or not is irrelevant. it's a harsh initiation. Might even, I would myself describe that more as a pseudo initiation. I don't really feel like I'm being initiated into, and obviously I see all this in retrospect. I had no idea what was going on at the time, but a pseudo initiation of sorts where, like hazing at a fraternity.
Mm-hmm.
It's like just boys initiating boys because we don't know what else to do, but we know that it needs intensity. Death needs to be on the line. And, I need to face my own death, like a death of identity, death of something.
Well, it's missing one very important ingredient in initiation, which is the presence of elder or mentor, right? A wisdom holder that is going to see the path about you becoming this newer version of yourself and will draw it out of you in a very effective and kind of with a high level of presence. So again, we have a failure of eldership in our culture. The chain was broken. This is what we need to reestablish. That ingredient is the missing ingredient. This is why, on some of these events we do, or like other types of men's training, we always revere the role of elder because they are the wisdom keeper. And when that's not there, we exactly what you described. We have a culture of boys initiating boys.
I'm reminded of, the name Malidoma Some? Of course. Yeah. He, I believe he was from West Africa, correct?
Yeah.
Something that he said, I read about this in Bill Plotkin's book, Nature and the Human Soul.
One of my favorites. Yeah.
That's one of my Bibles for developmental life and living as a human. But I remember reading in that Malidoma Some saying, to the objection that, these rites of passage are dangerous and not all the boys will make it. And I think to our Western mind, we tend to think, well, that's barbaric and brutal, and we should never put our children in harm's way. And I recall Malidoma saying, well, better that we lose some of our boys in the initiation rite of passage than we don't initiate them at all, and we live in a world of uninitiated boys as adults. And
and furthermore, I think it's like my memory of that passage is that there was no shame or blame on the boys that were lost. It was more of like just by chance. Yes, maybe something happened there, but it's just an offering up to this idea of like, this is the offering to live in an initiated culture, right?
Right. A living culture, ironically, a living culture is a culture that makes space for death, makes room for death. It's not exiled from death. What is Stephen Jenkinson says, we are death phobic and grief illiterate. And so, truly, Luke, I love the work that you're doing, man. I think it's of such vital importance. What would you say to, again, a father who sees in his son? I worked with a lot of men whose sons they're rebellious. They're like wanting to, one thing I've seen is this: the fathers let it go so far that now there's a common thing out there where their boys they're breaking the rules. They're maybe getting in trouble with the law, even, they've been arrested or they've done just foolish, stupid shit. They're failing at school, whatever, maybe 14, 15. And I've even seen this in my own family. The child then gets sent to wilderness school. You familiar with this?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. See it all the time.
Like a therapeutic wilderness school, and then that's a pathway to boarding school. Like they basically get taken from the home. And again, I don't know if that's good or bad. I'm not trying to make a judgment about it, but I'm curious for you. What do you say to the father who's starting to see, like, oh my goodness, my son my hands have been off of, no discipline. I'm not really disciplining him. I'm not really giving him boundaries or not sticking to them. He's a boy. Boys will do what boys do. But now he's starting to see the danger signs.
Yeah, it's a great question. Obviously this is the time that we show up as fathers, right? Like this is our moment. And all I can say is what I've done around that, right? I have a 12-year-old boy, and, I ask him, I say, like, what's the one thing that you would really want from me this year as a father, like to help you just be healthy and live the life you want to live. And his one thing is he wants to spend time on backpacking trips with me.
Wow.
He wants at least 2 a year, right? And so it's this same impulse around the wilderness therapy school, right? It's like to get out into the wild, have distracted time with me in a place where it's highly uncomfortable. There is an element of danger, but more importantly, there's an opportunity for him to shift his perspective about his life and have experiences of wonderment and awe and terror and aliveness. And for me, I view my role as a father. One of the most fundamental things I do as a father is I offer experiences around changing perspective. I offer adventures. My job, one of my primary jobs, is to snap my children out of their myopic, kind of self-centered everyday reality, the habits, the ruts that they get into, snap them out of that and show them different things. So this could be just, going on these backpacking trips. This could be taking them on trips around the world. This could be exposing them to different practices and different ways of living and thinking about the world, different cultures, and all while really focusing on the inner world and the meaning making that comes with that. So what you're describing, this is the time to give these boys different experiences. And in my opinion, best done with their fathers, right? When the fathers can show up, like this is the time to take them on rites of passage experiences, take them on backpacking trips yourself, take them on, whatever it is, even if it's a weekend car camping, to, leave the phones behind and have that time that where you're looking each other in the eyes. You've got some time with the stars. You're talking around, you're just chatting around about life around the campfire. That's all kids really want. When it really comes down to it, they want the loving presence of their parents, and they'll do just about anything to get it. They will raise all sorts of alarm bells. They will cause all sorts of problems if they're not getting it. So how do we set it up as parents so that they're getting enough of that deep drop in loving presence, looking each other in the eyes and saying, asking, how are you really doing?
What's really coming to me as well as you're sharing this is I'm aware that so many men feel pretty useless in their families, feel disconnected from their children, feel like, especially as the children start to get into their teens, they feel like, well, I mean, look, dads are even represented in media as these sort of hapless, just things that are in the way of something. And I know a lot of men feel so powerless, therefore they'll take, they'll go to apply power at work, for example, or they'll get caught in addiction or distraction, their fantasy football league or something. I'm curious, what happens to fathers when they start to really check in to their child's experience? And, we're talking about fathers and sons. Mm-hmm. But as sons start to come of these ages where, again, a lot of dads are, because they just don't know what else to do. Mm-hmm. Mom, if there's a mom in the home, she's often got a handle on it way more than he does. Not always. Sometimes it's the opposite. I've seen the opposite. But I'm curious, what happens for fathers in these experiences?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, a few things happen. There's usually great relief that they finally are showing up, for their children. And there's a sense of kind of like, I've been waiting so long to do this and I just didn't know how. So putting themselves in a situation where they feel like they can start to show up as the father they always wanted to be. I mean, I have this regular experience as a parent where there's a massive gap between the parent I thought I would be and the parent who I actually am. I think it's just like this very common experience as parents, like, oh, I thought I was going to be so much better at this.
Yeah.
And that's just an element of it, right? But to have some experience of like, okay, this is actually, I've really wanted to be able to support my son in this way or my children in this way. That's one piece. The other piece is, I don't know about you, but for me, there was not pretty much like 12 to 14 was pretty much the worst era of my life socially. Like it was just brutal. I mean, I had this very like rough Midwestern Catholic culture where it was just like tons of bullying and just, it was like elbows out. Right. And so when we see our children, especially our boys at that age, we start to like, all that stuff comes up again, right? And we see this on these experiences that I lead, these retreats, where the fathers start remembering what it was like to be that age. And some of it is not very much pleasant. It's not pleasant memories. And so we're also dealing with the like imprint of our own childhood at that age. And there's an opportunity there for us as fathers to actually look at how that's impacting our parenting and how it's impacting the way that we live our lives, right? It's yet another place where we can uncover some rocks and metabolize some shadows in ourselves, and best done, again, in the company of other men who can support us in that. So part of our programs is we actually we have men's circles for the fathers during parts of these weekends, so that they have a place where they can kind of like talk through their shortcomings as a father, or the stuff that they're seeing that's been brought up about, oh man, I just remember how brutal it was when I was 13 years old. Or they support each other, share ideas about how to work through challenges that their boys are having. Yeah, so it's a bit like that.
Yeah, one of my closest friends, who's a father to two children, he's one of the best fathers I know. He is constantly beating himself up about his parenting, constantly, and he's easily one of the best, most interested and attuned and checked in fathers that I know. So,
yeah, well, it's a thankless job, and I think it's just a common experience, especially for those of us that actually care about how we're doing. It's easy to kind of go numb on it and not care and just put things on autopilot. And I think that's kind of the default. But when you really start investigating and examining how you're showing up, there's always an opportunity to do it better.
Well, I'm curious, what do you think are some of the dominant common misconceptions or myths about, particularly as fathers as parents, that you encounter that mess things up, that just get men all in their heads and get us all twisted and don't serve us?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I get, one aspect of this is that, there's this idea that like the mother is the emotional support and the father is the structural discipline support, right? And while there is definitely some kind of fundamental truth to that, I think we get so locked into that way of thinking that we outsource the emotional connection to our children.
Like we just abdicate all responsibility for any emotionality, emotional presence.
Right. Right. And it just does a huge disservice, especially as men raising boys. We're kind of like signaling to the boys that somehow their emotions aren't okay. And and it's really easy to do because it's a lot harder to be, for me, it's a lot harder to be with some sort of messy emotional experience than it is to hold structure around discipline and
teach how to ride a bike.
Habit. Yeah, exactly. So
throw a baseball.
It's important. And fundamentally it comes down to, how comfortable am I with my own emotions and my own kind of like chaotic field that's underneath the surface for all of us, right?
A lot more questions on this, but I want to just take a quick little side, again, another little sidestep. And I'm curious about men who have daughters. Again, I know we can't, there's no absolute, I don't believe in absolutes and, but I am curious, what do you think is different about the father-daughter relationship than the father-son relationship, just in general, in your experience?
Boy, it's a great question, Bryan. Well, I have a daughter as well. I have a 12-year-old son and a 9-year-old daughter. And I haven't, professionally haven't done a lot of work with the daughter, with that. So I can only speak through my own personal experience, but, there's a way that the roles are a little bit flipped, right? So in my case, she comes to me for that like sweet emotional connection and but she's really looking to her mom about, what it means to be a woman. And there's a lot more friction there. There's a lot more rub
between her and her mother.
Yeah. And so it just could be situational to my family, but it just seems like there's like there's an easiness around the father-daughter relationship. There's less kind of baggage and kind of enmeshment and all of these things that I think happens often with mother-daughter relationships. I mean, it's such a complex relationship. So
Okay, yeah. I look. Life has not so far made it easy for me to be a parent. I'm
Hmm.
still working on that, exploring that. So I'm I don't pretend to really know much. Certainly not from personal experience, other than having parents,
Yeah.
being on that side of things. I'm curious. Coming back to emotional intelligence, what what can fathers do? How can they ensure that they are nurturing, maybe modeling emotional intelligence in their sons, helping their sons develop healthy emotional expression?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a practice like anything else, right? It takes investment. If I want to like lose 20 pounds, or I want to get, I want to put on some, I want to get, tone up, then I need to go to the gym and I need to get a plan in place where I do that, right? It requires actually that commitment and that investment. I would argue that the best way we can do it is to model it ourselves. It's less about like drawing it out of our children, although that's certainly important. And it's more about doing that deep work ourselves. There is a point of view that I think is really important around this, which is so often as men, we view emotions as some sort of sign of weakness, right? And the narrative's changing around this culturally, but I just want to name that, you know, there's a massive amount of research that will show you, especially in the matters of leadership, if you want to be an effective leader and you want to influence people around you and you want to live a life of success, and I would even argue fulfillment, it's best done through knowing what's happening inside of your own heart and mind and using that as information and intelligence to pull levers in your life. So emotional intelligence is being able to track what's occurring in my own body around how I'm feeling, being able to express it. That's part two, and being able to read it in other people and know what's happening for them. So those are like three tools we can work, and they're all a little bit different and distinct. But it's all a practice. And then once we've kind of cultivated that, we start to be able to draw that out in our children, right? So if my son is having a hard time, I can help explore like, oh, it seems like you're feeling a bit angry right now. Is that right? And I just start naming what I'm seeing in him and then ask him, is that it? Are you angry? Or are you feeling more bummed out or sad? And he can say, actually, I'm actually feeling a little more bummed out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's showing up a little bit like I'm frustrated, but I'm actually pretty disappointed. And so I can help him start to name it so that he's exercising that muscle. It's a practice then for him around identifying his emotion and hopefully helping him articulate it.
And look, in my work as particularly as a relationship coach and doing relationship work, I mean, one of the greatest challenges that most relationships face is a lack of emotional connection.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it is of vital importance for us grown men to start doing the work that our fathers didn't do with us, if they didn't, which most of them didn't, so that we can then also help our children do that work for themselves too. I think it's
Yeah. Well, you'll be a more powerful man because of it. You absolutely be more in touch with your own sense of power, and you'll be able to get more meaningful things accomplished in your life if you have some sense of what's happening in your internal landscape, particularly because we know that if it's left unattended and we're not facing it, it will show up in all sorts of messy ways in our relationships, in our ability to lead other people, and the way that people experience us as trustworthy or not. So there's actually, if you want to look at this from a very selfish perspective, there's a sense of like empowerment in it. And I think that's the narrative that's slowly changing in the culture around what it means to be kind of emotionally literate and have some integrity around what's happening in the human heart for men.
You work a lot with the hero's journey arc, and Joseph Campbell, father of the heroic journey, at least the articulation of it. I love that he said something years ago that totally reframed things for me. That he said, I don't think people are looking for the meaning of life, which is what I personally, Bryan Reeves, always thought I was looking for. Well, why are we here? Answering the question. He said, I don't think that's what we're actually looking for, but rather people are looking for the experience of being alive. And that, like what you're pointing at, coming alive in my body. Boy, we men, we sure are at war with ourselves. We sure fuck ourselves over through our that program of like you said, feelings are weakness, emotions are weakness. Yet we want to feel alive, and yet so much of our story is resisting our aliveness at the same time.
Yeah. So feeling alive, feeling a sense of wonderment and awe, feeling a sense of really being able to drink in and breathe in beauty and be in some sort of exchange with it. That's all part of those are all fruits of being able to like really turn and fiercely face our own demons in our own heart, right? And really know what's happening. And that is bravery. That is true warriorship. That is truly being a warrior, being able to face our shadows, face our fears, our doubts, our self-loathing, our shame, our, all the uncomfortable places. When we can do that, we will absolutely be more powerful and be more alive with the world around us.
How do you define a successful father-son relationship? Like, what are the key components of a thriving father-son relationship? And let's take that in the context again of adolescence.
I would think about it just as there's information and might even say like energy being exchanged freely between the father and son, right? Like, they're able to say what's true for them to each other, even if it's uncomfortable. They're able to walk side by side in the world with a level of ease and depth. I love that Robert Bly writes about, when women come together, or the feminine, let's just say the feminine in all of us, the feminine likes to connect in a circle, right? Like sitting in a circle.
Yeah.
And the masculine in all of us feels most connected walking side by side. And he says in the forest, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes not even a word needs to be said. Mm-hmm. So there's this feeling of moving together through the world where we're connected. We're looking at the world around us. We're taking in the beauty. We're navigating. We're maybe even strategizing a bit, whether words are spoken or not, but there's like an ease and a depth in that.
Yeah.
And for me, I just go back to my prayer is that, this work leads to the inevitable moment that is difficult in a teenage boy's life, that his father is one of the people he turns to when that happens, right? When something comes up around sex and relationship, or something hard socially happens, or he gets into some trouble, or he's confused, or he's depressed, that one of the people he turns to, not the only one, but one of the people he turns to is his father.
Yeah. And I'm ready to start sharing this more publicly, that, my relationship with my father, I so looked at him as a teenager, like, God, he is my God. He's the guy that I turn to. He's the one that'll know what I should do here. I remember when I went to college, I was thinking about joining a fraternity, and he's the only one whose opinion mattered. And for example, and then, he left when I was 4. My parents divorced. And so I didn't really know him until I was an adult, know him. And it was around age 26. So about 20, almost 25 years ago or so, that I first started realizing, maybe longer, I actually can't trust this man. I'm not safe to bring him certain things that I'm going through. I'm not safe. And those betrayals, it felt like a betrayal. I wouldn't have used that language at the time. I just knew, again, a lot of this in retrospect. And over the last probably 5 or 6 years, I've made attempts to have a new conversation with him. And in my case, he's just further retreated. Again, in my telling of the story, he's got this sort of spiritual fundamentalism going on. And I don't fit into that. I don't prescribe to certain of his beliefs and et cetera. And it's like he can't embrace me. I don't feel embraced by him. I don't feel leaned into by it. There's just like, we're estranged, and I don't know how to bridge that anymore. And I'm done trying. I'm curious, in your experience, in your mind, Luke, what would you say? Like, what insight would you have? What suggestion? Like so many men are estranged from their fathers, even if they're still in conversation with them.
Absolutely.
It's just a gritted teeth. Oh, fuck, I have to talk to this guy. Fine. I know he's going to say this and this, and fuck that guy, and blah, 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 blah. What do you say to that guy who, go.
Yeah. I mean, fundamentally, I think that betrayal is inevitable. I mean, even I had a wonderful present father, but he was not able to give me everything I needed. That's being human, right? And so there is a sense of recognizing the betrayal or the absence of our fathers that is inevitable in a man's life. Now, what do we do with that, right? The other aspect of this is I would just, the way I've made peace with it is I've split off the part of my father that gave me tremendous gifts, was present in areas that really was a blessing to me, helped shape the man I am, and the part of him that was wholly inadequate for the job, right? And I've had to do a lot of work with that latter one. I've really had to face that part of him that has lived in me, and all the beliefs I took on about myself because of those. And that's some pretty deep, and it sounds like you do that work and right like that, but that's the work, is to metabolize all of the belief structures about who we are and our value based on the absence of our father, and the father, not showing up in the way that we needed, to make sure that we're not living from that place of all of that ache and pain. So many men do. So many men live from a place of anger and rage or depression, or shut down because they didn't get what they needed from their father, right? And so.
Yeah, the frame that I've been working with this through, just me personally, in the last really only in the last year, and it's been through the gift of therapy, working with an elder therapist, a man in his 70s who his name is John Lee. He actually was on my podcast recently. Famous, is an author in the men's movement. Wrote a lot of amazing books like Flying Boy.
Flying Boy is a must read. It's a really good one. Yeah, recommend that.
Yeah, so I'm so lucky. He lives like 20 minutes from me, and so he's my therapist. And we've been working it through the frame of stop sunning your father. Stop sunning your father. Like, that was a revolutionary thought to me. Like, stop expecting all the things of that man that a son expects from a father.
Yeah.
Like, that switch for me has been everything. Like that has been my own, even in my late 40s, like another little initiatory rite of passage, a step across a threshold. That, again, an elder man, my therapist. I mean, we're not really doing rites of passage work, but it feels like there's a blueprint that's coming online inside of me that is now enabling me to have a new relationship with this man who, is my biological father, but I don't feel father from him anymore.
Right. Yeah. I mean, David Data writes about this as well, right? He says, how a man, I can't remember the exact line, but it's something along the lines of, once a man can live out from under the attention of his father, he's truly liberated. So live as if your father's already dead.
Yeah.
Right. And how can you live as if your father's already dead? And to not live through the contorted lens of our father's approval. When I think about the moment you're in, there's this idea that what would you need to say to him in order to feel, because his life is coming to an end, what appreciation would you want to bestow upon him for the gifts that he did give you, that he could actually hear before he's gone, right? Because that is a thing that's the loss, right? Is that there's no more opportunity for appreciation. The resentment is something that for most of us, when our parents get to that age, it's just pointless to actually take much of that directly to them. They're not in a place in their life where they can do much with it. Right. But the appreciation, the recognition of the legacy that they're leaving, the generative legacy, that is something that they can hear, and it could be a tremendous gift.
Yeah. 100%. In my journey of stepping out of being his son, but by which I just mean the expecting the father stuff. There were the two parts of it. There was the saying the difficult things I needed to say. These are the ways in which I felt deeply hurt by you, betrayed by you, let down by you, and these are the reasons. And again, not dumping everything out on the table, but saying the things that I hadn't said for a lifetime because the son was too scared to stand up to the father. And also all of the things that I'm grateful for, all the gifts you have given me, the ways you have shaped me as a man that I'm proud of. And kind of, I knew I would either do that over his gravestone or in conversation with him. And anyway, There's so much more, Luke, that we could dive into around this. I mean, it's such a rich conversation. And we'll start to wrap up here. I know we're coming up on time. You have a few more minutes?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So, all right. So a man's been listening to this. He's like, this is igniting something in him. I know some men are going to be listening to this. Maybe they don't have children, they don't have sons, but they're also like, fuck, I was never initiated. So first off, what's one insight you might share with that man, the man who was like, I've never been initiated. He feels it, recognizes it now. What would you say to that man?
Yeah, go find some men that when you look at them and you talk to them, there's a feeling of like, I want to live more like that man, a man that maybe for me, it was just like a tremendous amount of passion, but I also could feel their heart. I knew that they weren't going to let any of my bullshit pass. And I just spent a lot of time with them. Anything they were doing, I would go do. I remember like doing some coaching sessions with this guy, Tom Daly in Boulder, Colorado. And I would literally like go, he'd say, here, come, I'll do a coaching session with you. You just turn my compost pile for a couple of hours afterwards. So he had me out there with a pitchfork in his backyard, turning his compost pile as he was kind of initiating me into these ways of being a man that's living like a bold life.
I love it.
But yeah, just find some communities. There's tons of great communities out there that are doing this type of rites of passage work for men, reintroducing men into a sense of healthy masculinity, initiating them into sacred masculinity.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you have, places you send people around this, but it's definitely very possible. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah. I have a program called Elevate 2024. If you're listening to this, you'll have heard me talking about it in the little in-betweens. But yeah, it's my year-long initiatory men's experience for guys typically in their mid-30s I've got guys that come through that in their 60s that still feel like not initiated. Again, they may not use that language,
right?
But I mean, you and I both know that that's the epidemic that we're all experiencing. So, what about the father who's hearing this? Maybe his son isn't of age or his child isn't of that age yet, but he's like, he wants to prepare. He wants to do things different. What resources do you have for him? And of course, you could also share where they could get in touch with you or find out what you're doing or sign up for one of your weekends.
Yeah. So briefly, my weekend is fathersonconnection.com. That's for 10 to 14-year-olds and their dads. We're also going to do a backpacking trip next summer. That'll be, will be maybe just for the boys. But Father Son Connection is where if somebody wants to come be guided through these experiences, that's where you can reach out. But generally, I'd say, it's back to this idea, go into the wild with your kids. Like, even if it's car camping, get outside of just the same myopic, everyday, every weekend rhythms, commit to leaving your phone in the car and take them on a trip, take them outside, get them into the wild where they can feel discomfort. They can feel how vast the cosmos is. They can feel the frigid air in the morning, the warmth of the fire. And maybe you get a collection of buddies and you do this together with your kids, with your boys. It's astounding how meaningful and how deep that can, it's a memory making experience, but it's also a way to open up conversations that you're not going to be able to have just sitting around and having movie night, right? When we're out in the natural world, nature becomes its own character in the story, right? And so we're relating to all the elements and the bear or the raccoon that shows up, and it opens up all sorts of possibilities in these young boys or young people's lives.
Yeah, great advice. I'm reminded. I mean, the best memories I have of my father were bathing in a stream Wyoming, somewhere on the Snake River in Wyoming on a car camping trip when I was probably 14, seeing him go into that cold water and me following his lead, going down the Grand Canyon on a donkey, looking out over this sheer drop. I mean, those are the memories with my father that are so precious, and they're all in nature.
And I have to say, I have a lot of these types of conversations with fathers and other men, and virtually everyone says what you just said, right? Like, I will invite people into this, and everybody always says, "Oh, I have this memory of being camping with my dad, or being on this, going on this very long drive to the top of the mountain and getting out and walking around." It's like, that is it. Like, this is what the kids are so hungry for, and there's taking in the beauty, but there's also the feeling of connection with their dads. That's really fundamentally what this is all about.
Yeah. Well, beautiful, Luke. I do want to finish, because I'm really just curious to know my little 5-question lightning round. I call this your 5 core emotional triggers. And we'll go fast. What makes you mad?
When someone doesn't do something they said they were going to do.
Yeah, me too. What makes you feel sad?
I mean, fundamentally, when I've lost a hope or a dream, there's that achy feeling of kind of a hole in my heart that was full. So lately I've felt sadness around changes in a relationship, that there's like a kind of that longing, aching of like, I wish this could be different.
Yeah. What causes you to feel joy?
The most recent time I felt joy was one of my clients. So I coach people, coach leaders, and one of my clients sold their company, and their success, their sense of fulfillment in that felt like mine, and I felt quite happy about that.
Yeah, beautiful. What causes you to feel fear?
The most recent time I felt fear was very like a true, honest fear. I was out in the middle of the wild, like 45 minutes on a hike off the trail with my 2 kids, and we stepped on a yellow jacket nest, and we all got attacked, and I wasn't sure how bad it was going to be, and I was in utter terror, but also needing to effing deal. So that was a lot of fear.
Wow. Did you get stung? Your children get stung?
Yes, stung. Dog got stung. I got stung about 5. I think I got stung 5 times. My daughter got stung once. She'd had a reaction to a bee when she was younger, and she started saying things like, "I can't breathe out of my throat, and my heart feels funny." And we're like, literally just in the middle of nowhere. She was fine, by the way, but talk about fear and adrenaline, and like, holy shit.
Right.
This is why, this is why humans feel fear, right? It's like, it's the purest form of fear, right?
Yeah.
Pay attention, serious danger here. Your daughter's possibly, not safe here. Like, how do you get into action? That's like raw, honest fear.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Last one.
She was fine.
Yeah. She was fine. Last one, dealer's choice. What causes you to feel either shame, embarrassment, or that just makes you want to hide from the world?
What causes it? Well, what causes it is if I don't give myself enough space, all the accumulation of all the other emotions that you're describing, I think it just like piles on to the point where I go into like shame. I just get that it feels like there's a pit in my stomach, in my solar plexus. And for me, that occurs as kind of self-loathing and, self-judgment. So for me, it's like getting out and keeping my batteries charged and doing my practices. That's what prevents that.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, Luke, thank you so much. Again, the website is
father-son-connection.com.
And people can learn more about you. I think you also have your own website, lukeentrup.com.
Yeah, I have lukeentrup.com. You can find me on Instagram. I also have my own podcast, Crazy Wisdom.
Okay. Luke, thank you so much for coming on Men This Way, man. Really appreciate your work.
Thanks for having me.